Please consider hitting that subscribe button if you haven't already. All right, now that we're done working on the 280Z Black Pearl, we get to work on the 260Z. I don't really have a name for it. It's just kind of a Franken Z right now, so. Oh, there's a lot I have to do. So the QuickFuel 650 double pumper needs to be rebuilt. It's got some clogged idle jets on one of the metering blocks, so that's causing an issue when idling. Need to tear it all apart, get all the crud out of there. The timing needs to be redone, and then I'm going to put a new timing tape on the harmonic balancer just to ensure that zero mark on the harmonic balancer is indeed top dead center, which I don't believe it is. Actually, I know it's not because that's a different 8-inch harmonic balancer on a '67 engine, so they moved them a little bit on like the 6 1/4 inch balancers, which what originally came on this thing, or like 6 3/4 inch balancer is what it originally had. And I marked the crank snout and the key to that mark on the harmonic balancer, and they were about an inch different just on the size and the location of the keyway within the snout itself. So I'm going to actually take the time to find top dead center, put a new piece of timing tape on it, and retime everything, get the carb rebuilt, and then I got a new diaphragm for the fuel pressure regulator as well. Also, the adapter plate for the spread bore Edelbrock intake to the square bore QuickFuel carburetor, it works, and the reason I went with that was because it has its own dedicated vacuum fitting on the back side of this. Most of the spread bore to square bore adapter plates do not have provisions for a tapped vacuum source. You don't want your PCV vacuum line to be hooked up to your brake booster vacuum line in a T configuration, because what will happen, oil that has been vaporized or heated up and gone through that vacuum line will eventually make its way to the diaphragm of your brake booster, and it will break down the rubber in the diaphragm itself, which will cause you to lose power brakes at some point in time or another in the future. So to prevent that, you want two different vacuum sources. You really want a specific vacuum source dedicated solely to your power brake booster, and that's the reason I have this adapter plate with this fitting. The other one goes into a fitting on the back side of the carburetor itself. Obviously, you have the fitting on the back of the carburetor itself, but again, you don't want to just run a 3/8 hose off of this and tee into the PCV valve and your brake booster for the same, the reasons that I just mentioned. You don't want oil getting back to your diaphragm and your power brake booster unless you just like rebuilding brake boosters all the time. So to prevent that, each dedicated source, one for PCV, one for brake booster, and therein lies the problem. There's only one here in this throttle plate on the bottom of this carburetor. So with the adapter plates, I need one. So I originally bought this one because of this fitting. While that was the original intention, there's some issues. One being that on part of the spread of the carburetor, there's just barely, and I mean barely, any engagement to the actual manifold flange itself. So that's a weak spot, and what I think is happening is it's causing a slight vacuum leak constantly. So I noticed when you could just put pressure on the carburetor, even though the carburetor was torqued down to spec, you could put pressure on one side or the other and it would immediately die. So I hooked a vacuum gauge up to the engine. It's running with about 13 inches of vacuum, which would typically be enough. But I want to throw the proper adapter plate on there, drill and tap a hole in the back, that way I can still have this fitting, and then put that on there with new gaskets and see if that vacuum reading gets any higher. Right now the car runs, but doesn't run very well. It has a really ridiculously lean stumble upon acceleration, so that leads me to believe an issue that I had in the past with the metering block stopped up on the idle jet circuit, along with some of the other air passages in the metering block has stopped up again. So I don't know if I'm getting trash beyond the filters in the fuel system or if the actual fuel line itself is breaking down. So I'll cross that bridge when the time comes. But for right now, we're going to take this adapter plate, probably chunk it in the aluminum scrap pile, Going to take this fitting off and then drill and tap our new, or newer, proper spread bore to square bore adapter flange. So the modification of the spread bore to square bore carburetor spacer was a big fat fail. The first time I drilled the hole, I tapped it with 1/8 inch NPT, and apparently that tap was no good. It wallered out the threads, made the hole bigger than it should have been, and the threaded fitting didn't actually fit. So I went to the next best thing, which is welding a fitting on, and the fitting that I have, unfortunately, was made of steel. You can't weld steel to aluminum. You can, but we're not going to get into those. It's not worth the trouble. So I made an aluminum little barb. I had some aluminum stock around. I threw it up on the lathe and made a quick little barb. It took about 5-10 minutes, not a big deal. And then more trouble. So the material that these are made out of is what appears to be just cast aluminum, and it is horrible to weld on. So yeah, it didn't go according to plan. So I've abandoned welding a new bung onto the back of this carb spacer, and I'm doing what I should have done a long time ago, which is getting the proper low profile brass 90-degree NPT fitting to screw into the back of the Edelbrock spread bore intake that allows the clearance for the back fuel bowl of the double pumper to clear, and it allows it to have a separate vacuum source at full port for the brake booster and or the PCV valve. That way I can still have them separate, as the QuickFuel 650 double pumper carb only has one 3/8 barb vacuum source and the base plate. So again, as previously mentioned, you don't want those combined or teed off of each other because you run the risk of having oil get to your diaphragm in the brake booster, and that just is not fun. That's a whole nother enjoyable process to rebuild a brake booster. So I'm going to keep them separate, and I'm going to actually get the proper parts this time. So we're going to move on to rebuilding the carburetor. So breaking everything down, checking out the metering blocks and seeing if there's any blockages and or trash or debris in the fuel bowls. And hopefully that will allow me to kind of diagnose the state of the fuel lines and filtration system. one step forward, one step back. I ordered a timing pointer so I could put a new timing tape on the harmonic balancer to ensure that the top dead center mark on the harmonic balancer was in the correct position. Turns out I was right in my assumption in that they are different by about 12 to 13 degrees. So I applied the tape where it should be after I used a piston stop to positively stop the piston at top dead center. You just basically rotate the crank around until it hits the piston stop, and then you go back the other way until it again hits the stop. You measure those two places on the harmonic balancer, and then right smack dab in the middle of that is your top dead center. So I did that process, was going to slap this new timing pointer on there, and then I realized I ordered the wrong one. I ordered one for a 8-inch harmonic balancer, and I have a 7-inch. So I have reordered the proper one. I'm going to be returning this one, and I got to wait till tomorrow until that one shows up. So that's it. That's all we got going on today. The carburetor is rebuilt. The fuel pressure regulator is rebuilt. I got to wait on the spacer, the proper timing pointer. I've actually got some other stuff on the way as well. I ordered a new alternator with a new alternator bracket because I don't like that stock looking bracket. It kind of takes away from, I don't know, looking better. So I've got a new one coming in, and I'm upgrading the alternator to hopefully prevent the power draw, because right now that's just a stock little small block Chevy alternator. I don't actually know how many amps it is, but I can tell you every time that the fan kicks on, my RPM drops on the engine by about 150 to 200 RPM. So I know the alternator, or at least the electrical load, is putting kind of more stress on the system than it should. So I'm hoping a 100 amp alternator will fix that issue. And if not, then I got to start chasing wiring problems, which I rewired this whole car about 10 years ago. So there's probably some wiring problem. So after the new parts get here, we're just going to keep on working. So hopefully we'll pick this up again tomorrow. If you like this stuff and you want to see more of it, click that like button and leave a comment below. I'm always asking you to subscribe, and we need to get those subscriber counts up. So if you haven't done so already and you find this stuff enjoyable, or you got some information out of it, please consider hitting that subscribe button if you haven't already. If you're going to hit the subscribe button, go ahead and turn on your bell notifications. That way you get notified just as soon as I get around to posting another video. I appreciate it as always. And until next time, thanks for watching this one.